Welcome to Spark Love. I'm Sumi.
And I'm Ray.
We created this space to share how we took our relationship from toxic to extraordinary.
To be able to improve, we gotta talk, and that's what we're here for.
Come with us on a journey where we will openly discuss all of our challenges and our stories. This is Spark Love. Welcome to another episode of Spark Love. My name is Sumi, and this is Ray, my amazing partner.
Hello. Hola.
Today's episode is about boundaries and exploring whether you have healthy boundaries or lack of boundaries within your relationship and how to take the next step.
Right, so what's in it for you guys in this episode? Understanding the difference between healthy relationship boundaries and codependent or controlling relationship dynamics. Stories in which you might see yourself or your partner or your ex-partner or a friend even. Just some stories to make the point. And maybe how to get started on improving at setting boundaries in your relationships. If you feel like after going through this discussion, you feel like you need to revisit that subject in your relationship, that's your major takeaway here. Should be an invitation to reflect on that.
And there's actually some questions that we've put in as well, so we're going to go over them for you quickly. But we'll also drop them in the comments so that you can follow them, because that will help you take the first step, actually.
So why don't we get started with boundaries? You're one Google search away from figuring it out, but this is our take, right? What we understand from it, applied in the context of a healthy relationship. So there you have it.
So healthy boundaries are not a scary or negative thing, whereas we have actually, in many cases, been raised to not understand boundaries or have boundaries, or for boundaries to be scary or negative or even selfish. So traditionally, or at least what I have witnessed throughout life and the people that I know around me have witnessed, is that boundaries is something that is seen as selfish, because how could you say no to me, right?
It tends to make people upset.
It makes people upset. It makes people feel rejected. There's usually a lot of conflict around boundaries, and so they have this image of being selfish and unfair, but in reality, they're very important. They're an important part of having a healthy relationship with yourself and everybody else around you. So, talking about setting boundaries in a relationship does not mean that you are getting detached from your partner. So, we're specifically going to discuss, I guess, mostly around partner, because this is a relationship podcast. So, when it is with your partner, it doesn't mean that there is detachment. You can have healthy boundaries, and you can stick to those healthy boundaries, enforce them, and still be close and intimate and connected to your partner. You don't need to be in a situation in which you are fearing detachment from your partner because there's these new boundaries in place.
Or even the discussion per se.
Yeah, or even the discussion.
So to bring that up or to implement it in an existing relationship that has a lack of boundary problem is of course a delicate process in which we would not be able to tell you, and probably nobody will be able to tell you what would work for your case. It is a little bit of learning about communication and intimate conversations, which we discussed in our previous episode.
Trying different things, different approaches. But of course, first of all, you need to understand yourself. You need to understand those boundaries. We'll get into that, but yes. So personal boundaries are the limits that We set for ourselves as individuals in relationships. They protect our sense of personal identity, and they help guard against feeling overwhelmed or being overwhelmed by the demands of your partner. Do you want to touch on anything about that?
Sure. Well, I think we're going to touch into all of that later on. But just to add a comment onto that, would be that the more I heard from someone saying that our life is being shaped by every time we say yes or no to something, right? If you say yes or no to the most random things, it can have a huge turning point in your life. So when you are saying yes to things that you want to say no to, it's a typical case of lack of boundaries. You want to say no, but you don't say no because the other person is going to be unhappy or sad or feel rejected or whatever. So we end up saying yes, and we put ourselves in situations. So this is a classic issue that I deal with since forever, and it affects also my romantic relationships because it's something that I have a struggle with. I have understood about boundaries more recently in my life as an adult, but it is something that I didn't know anything about. So I'm gonna just try and share with you guys what we have understood from it in these last few years. And basically that's the most the easiest example I can think of. You feel like saying no, you really want to say no, but you end up saying yes because the other person, shame, or they're gonna be upset, I don't want to have any fights, I'm just gonna go through, I'm avoiding conflict, I just want peace.
I don't want to upset my partner, I don't want to be rejected or judged for not wanting to do that thing. So simply put, a relationship with healthy boundaries is one in which both partners feel closely connected while maintaining a strong sense of individuality and independence within the relationship. Being in a successful relationship does not mean that this person completes you or that you complete each other. We've spoken about this before, the 50%, 50% and the 100%, 100%. This is a very similar concept, like two whole people coming together in a relationship. And this by whole because we're all whole. Doesn't matter how many wounds you have, doesn't matter how much trauma you have, we are all whole. But the idea that you're only bringing part of yourself, which is kind of like the theme by the 50% thing, or the, we need to complete each other because because somehow we're not good on our own concept. So that idea of you're perfectly okay whether you're with the person or not. You are a whole person, and that need to be with someone. That being with someone doesn't now mean that, you are no longer...
Yeah, the term, you complete me, is a romanticism, and it's a beautiful idea and feeling even, but it's not a reality. And keeping that clear, that is not how it works. That you are 100%, a whole individual who has a story, was born, had a family, and at some point you met this person who's now your relationship partner. That is worth a ton as well, a lot, because it's you and who you have been and who you are going to turn into. And so that deserves to be somehow guarded and protected for your own interests, for your own essence and true wantings. And not having boundaries, it will end up in the situation in which you will give away all of this, maybe quality time, or maybe resources, or maybe getting into situations that you didn't want to be at. It little by little can build up resentment, and we'll get into that. But it's a risky game. Pleasing and letting your partner overstepping your boundaries regularly builds up a feeling of unrest in the relationship, and it's no one's specific fault. It's a duo dynamic that needs to be improved.
Yes. And then also the other thing I wanted to add was the expectation that is put around the idea of you complete me. Because with you complete me, there is all these expectations of what your partner needs to bring to be able to complete you. When a lot of the things that need to complete you are things within yourself. I just wanted to mention that. So yes, it is important to respect that there's differences that exist between your partner and yourself. No matter how close you can be to your partner, no matter how intimate or connected you are to your partner, you have very different beliefs, values, perspectives of life, hobbies, hopefully. Doesn't mean you can't have hobbies in common, but definitely have things that are your own. Things that are your own. It's important to remember that and not kind of like morph into each other too much.
Into a two-headed human. Sharing is caring, but do you need to share everything, really? There are boundaries within sharing. Sharing is important in any relationship, but there are, of course, things that sharing them, it's a risky recipe. It crosses the boundaries of personal space that are generally recommendable for any partnership of any type, for any individuality to have any chance to exist. So some examples of boundaries in sharing would be stuff like bank accounts or your toothbrush, your underwear. It's obvious that you don't share everything in a relationship. If that's what you have been trying to make yourself believe, it really is not applicable. It's not universal. And how do you differentiate between those that you obviously should not share, like the toothbrush, versus the things that you are not so sure, like the Facebook password, right? Like you don't necessarily want to share that. Some people feel honestly comfortable with sharing that. Some people don't, but they give in because of the same situation.
Because your partners fear that you're hiding something. Because if you don't want, remember, like we mentioned before in the beginning, if you don't want to give your boundary is no, this person gets upset, gets annoyed, gets like why they start creating stories around why you're saying no to them. And many times these stories come from fear, past experiences, trauma, insecurities. And in the example of Facebook, could then be, oh, so what are you hiding from me? Are you cheating on me? Or like, what are you doing? That like this distrust in the fact that you can have the boundary and say no, that's a perfectly acceptable thing. You can have that individuality that you don't want your partner to see all your personal conversations, whether you're talking about anything, can just be your personal intimate space, and that's perfectly acceptable. And
if you care about it,
if you care,
if you think it's a place where only you should be looking, then that should be what ends up happening, and not that you give in to pressure from your partner. In any case, the things that are obviously, you should not be sharing, like I said, the toothbrush or the underwear, hopefully. All hobbies, right? You can have as many hobbies in common as possible. That's fantastic because you get to have fun together. But all hobbies in common is not recommendable. It should be really nice that you have hobbies of your own, of yours with your friends, of yours with your family, of yours with your dog, just other things that are not together. If you are doing all of that together, even if it's not bothering anyone, that boundary needs to be catered for.
Because of that individuality, which is important. It's super important because if you want to be with a person long term, it's important to have that individuality. And sometimes in the beginning, it doesn't exist. Like for us in the beginning, we were like two peas in a pod. And we only in like the last 3 years only in like the last 3 years did we actually start getting more into the idea of being individuals and having our own things
cultivating
going
individuality.
On. Yeah, cultivating that individuality, because before we were like, we're laughing, but we were so, I think we were very codependent, and like, it was also our lifestyle that shaped it, but it was...
Yeah, also we didn't have any friends around, so it made a difference. So that touches on not all friends in common. Yeah, it needs important to have your own friends. Your partner should have their own friends. it's okay if you're all friends, but for example, in Sumi and I's case, she has her friends that are also my friends, but much less intimate friends. They are more close, they're intimate friends, and I am just friends with her best friends. But we all friends. We can do group things together and it's fun, but they also have their own relationship. They go on their outings, they have their conversations, they have their own inner jokes. And it's several people. It's not only one other person, but several people in which each of us has a completely different type of relationship and interaction and sort of intimacy that is not the same as within your
or like a group
romantic relationship.
Yeah.
So that is very important to cultivate, having your own friends, and you can maybe choose your friends poorly, and your partner could be honestly, from a genuine place, concerned of who you hang out with.
Yeah.
It also could, it's suspicious to be, you're not giving me enough attention, you're with your friends, you care about your friends more than me. I cannot tell you what is true in your particular situation, but it is important to think about it and to realize that if you have none of it for real and you're pushing a little bit in your favor, maybe communicate it better, get to agreements or something, but needs to be protected. Have your own friends, have your own hobbies, have your own toothbrush, have your own bank account. And if you feel like it's important to you, have your privacy in your phone and your social media. If that's, if that is sacred, or you are shy or uncomfortable or whatever reason, not because you're hiding something, but because it feels wrong to you that somebody is looking into your conversation with your auntie or whatever, your best friend, then that it's worth protecting.
Yeah, it's a relationship like this, that intimate relationship you have with your best friends, where you talk about things that, your friends tell you things that they don't want your partner to know about, right? There's that intimacy you have with other people that is important to maintain. And I wanted to say something else and I forgot.
Well, there's the one agreeing on everything. It's an unrealistic expectation, first of all, but also if actually practiced by force, agreeing on everything, that means that one of the two are always giving in to the other person's opinion because of the same reason, because of fear of making them upset or hurting them. So that creates codependent scenarios. And the opposite, which is establishing boundaries, hopefully those boundaries are discussed and agreed upon, and that doesn't mean they're going to magically work now, but there is a mutual interest in sticking to this new arrangement of things because it's most convenient for the relationship.
Another side note as well is that boundaries are not something that is it's the one way. It doesn't mean because you set your boundaries that for your entire life that means that that's your boundaries. Things change. Like, you grow as a person, you change, you work on your trauma, you heal. So your boundaries sometimes could be coming from a place of trauma, and throughout your life, throughout your healing process, your boundaries will change. And that's why as well in a relationship, like we've spoken about this in some of our other episodes, and we'll probably do an episode specifically about it, but that learning to grow with your partner, that person is not going to be the same when you met them versus 5 months, 10 months, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, that person's not going to be the same. So your boundaries are not going to be like, okay, we decide on them now and then this is it forever. It needs to be a constant discussion, and the comfort, like, develop with time, the comfort to, hey, this is, that boundary that I had set, it's okay. I don't really care so much about it anymore, so don't worry about it. But now I have this other boundary. And it's important also to realize that if boundary setting is uncomfortable, you can set middle points. There are ways to, saying no to this from the beginning is too conflicting or too difficult for the other person to handle. Sometimes you can come to the middle if it is something that you care about. If you want that, baby steps, like come to the middle, see how it goes, and
baby, why don't you just meet me in the middle? Right, so sharing and honesty are present in all healthy relationships, but so are healthy boundaries. But what happens when we don't have healthy boundaries? I think we have covered it a little bit anyways, but just to be specific, one of the consequences of a relationship lacking boundaries is that one or both partners start developing a feeling of avoidance and rejection towards each other, like maybe feeling relieved when the partner went out to do something by themselves. It's like, oh, nice, finally by myself, I can fart. That is a huge indicator that your relationship needs boundaries, because it's not a healthy situation that you're relieved when your partner leaves.
Yeah, it should be like, "Aw,
oh, I'm gonna miss them."
I'm gonna miss them,"
or at least neutral, but not
yeah,
relief.
at least neutral. So and then like, you know, it should be okay. It should be perfectly okay. Like.
So that's a huge indicator of need to look
and actually the other way, before interrupting, the other way was, the one is like I'm so relieved my partner is leaving, and then there's the other one that is like, oh, I'm upset, I'm sad that my partner's leaving, like, why are you leaving? You should be around me all the time, don't leave me. I tease Ray about that sometimes, but I don't actually really mind. I'm perfectly happy being in my own space. I have my own things I do, and it's fun. But there is
a fine line, I guess. I do enjoy being home alone for a short period, like for 1 hour or 2 hours, like having the house to myself, especially when you like take the dogs to the vet or something, so there's no one, it's just me. That is I enjoy the silence, the knowing that I don't have to give attention to anyone, even if I'm not doing anything. But that doesn't mean I am relieved when it happens or looking forward to it. I just notice when it has happened like 2 times ever or 3 times, like, oh, this is nice. But for example, when you have been doing trainings that are all day long and I see you like 1 hour before sleep and the next day I don't see you at all for like 12 hours, it is not enjoyable. I get bored. After 2-3 hours by myself, I did everything I would want to do by myself that I normally don't, because I'm always surrounded by other people, at least you. But that's enough, right?
Yeah, guys, we are very happy in each other's space. Like, it's comfortable, it's happiness, it's like we don't get bored of each other. We have not ever had that situation and then we're like, oh, we're bored of this person. I have never been bored in 6 years and 4 months. I have never been bored.
I wish you would go shopping.
But I don't have it. But that doesn't mean that when we're not apart, that having that alone time is good and that we created. Like, I go to the gym. I do my training a lot by myself. I go hang out with my friends by myself. Ray does his music, his bands, go to the gym, hangs out with his friends from time to time.
A lot less.
I'm the one who hangs out most with my friends. I go out the most with my friends. And I'm also the one who teases the most about when he leaves, like, oh, don't leave. But I'm the one who goes out the most.
Actually, I have an interesting story, and let me see if I remember when it's story time to bring it up about that. The not necessarily relief, but behaving differently when your partner is not around. That is another indicator. Another indicator is my partner won't let me. Oh, my boyfriend won't let me do that, or he would kill me. Oh, she would be upset with me for a month.
My partner will take sex away for a month or something because they're upset with me because I did this thing that they don't like.
I cannot do that to them. Like, you have a job offer and it's in another city. No, but how can I do that to my girlfriend? She rejected going to whatever job for some place for me, and now how can I do that to her? It's a tricky situation, but you need to think about it. The decision cannot be based on, no, I don't want to hurt the other person. That is an unhealthy source.
That's an extreme version of like moving to another city, but there's small things just within life, living together or not living together, in which if you find yourself just randomly in your life, throughout your life, saying things like, I can't do that because my partner, if you find yourself saying these specific things, so I can't do this because my partner, and my partner won't let me, or I can't do that because my partner, right? So I can't do XYZ because I'm in a relationship with this person and they don't like it, or the other way around. Like, you can't do this because you're in a relationship with me and I don't like this thing. And that is an unhealthy dynamic, because it's like a form of codependency and control, like we were talking about before. Those would be examples of codependent and controlling relationship dynamics, where your partner will not let you do something because they don't like it. It's okay to not like something and to discuss it and to try and understand where it's coming from, because again, a lot of what we don't like comes from a place of pain and fear and trauma, and sometimes
it doesn't make sense.
And it's unfair to just demand your partner cannot do it, because then you are taking away that person's individuality. You are controlling them to be a version of you that you're comfortable with.
So another consequence of not having boundaries is when you have this closeness to the point that you break each other's space and disrespect each other's individuality. So these are situations that are created voluntarily, and like you were explaining, you voluntarily start painting yourself as a different person to create this reality that is based on lies, honestly. And it's from that point of view, it's kind of a fake closeness.
Yeah.
But dealing with these kind of things, any of the challenges that we have discussed so far in our podcast episodes and the many more that we will be discussing, in any of those situations when you are challenged in your relationship, in boundaries or in lack of intimacy or in whatever we are going to discuss, dealing with it as a couple, as a team, and successfully, dealing with it, overcoming it together, that creates a very real type of closeness. It's very different to the type of closeness that is created in a codependent, overly agreeable dynamic.
Where you try mold, like you start trying to mold into a person, like into a person to fit your partner. So you try and mold into the person that they want. It's important to remember individuality. Let's just wrap that up before we move on. Individuality is an important thing to protect. And if you feel like you are struggling, like you are molding into your partner, you are too dedicated to creating intimacy and to having a peaceful space in your home or in your relationship that you are suppressing, you are creating a situation in which there could be resentment and there could be distance. It could be distance. Like Ray said, it could be a fake closeness. And so just remembering that, again, we are all from different places. We have different backgrounds. We have different traumas, beliefs, perspectives, past experiences. We are not the same. It is impossible to find someone you're going to be identically the same with. And if you are, it's going to be a nightmare of a situation, because your shit is going to trigger each other like endlessly. So it is good to be with a different person. That's the idea of being with another person. The idea is not to shape this person into a version that you want them to be.
Nor to shape yourself
around. Or to shape yourself into someone that you think you need to be. But coming together and being in a relationship in which you can set boundaries. And you could be in a relation. This doesn't mean like, this is for you if you're starting, what I mentioned, like say you're starting a relationship or you're not in one yet, to remember. But even if you are in a relationship, it doesn't mean that you could even be in a 5, 10, 20-year relationship and struggle with boundaries. And you can change things within your relationships. There are ways to improve. And so it is important to define your boundaries and be honest with your partner about what you need or don't need from them in order to feel good about your relationship. So what I mean by don't need or need is in the situation of like, you don't want your partner in your Facebook account, or you don't want your partner going to every hobby with you, or you don't want your partner to be in every friend situation. You want to be able to hang out intimately with your personal friends, right?
Your partner doesn't need to know everything you talked about with your friends. And
if you are like that, that's perfectly okay. But you need to decide that for yourself. You need to define what that is for you as a person and what you are comfortable with in your relationship. What would make your relationship a lot more comfortable and easy and flowing? And that is how you kind of would shape your boundaries around those things. Again, a lot of our boundaries come from nonsense and from our pain and so it's very good to be objective. And we're going to give you guys some cool questions that are coming up. So identifying your feelings and accepting them is one of the first steps to setting healthy boundaries, is to know and understand your feelings. So it's really important to know what your feelings are and to understand them. You may get caught up in your partner's emotions and feelings and tend to overlook your own. So you could be too focused in your partner's feelings and not pay enough attention to your own. So focusing too much on the outside and this is actually a common thing in most parts of our lives, like in life in general. We tend to focus outward instead of inward. And so it's important to recognize and understand what is making you feel bad or depleted within your relationship. Because if you're feeling bad or depleted within your relationship, that is going to build up and build up and build up and build up. And it's not going to go so well in the future or end very well. So like we had originally started discussing individuality and then to discuss what it really is, boundaries and how important it is to establish them. It all comes down again to the individuality, because in order for you to establish boundaries in your relationship, you need to know what your boundaries are and why, hopefully. So that comes with like introspection and reflection to try and figure out how you have felt in certain situations, or at least when they do happen again, pay attention that one time. How do you feel? Why do you think you feel like that? Go into it as much as you can. But, for practical purposes, there are 7 words that seven questions that you can ask yourself to try and figure out what are your boundaries around any subject that might be sensitive to you in your relationship. So number 1, what is important to me? Sometimes we have no clue, but well, if you don't know, that's a whole other subject, but you should know what are your priorities and should know is subjective. Depends where you are on your journey. Well, you want to know what you're... if you don't, give it some importance, because without that, it would be difficult to establish real boundaries. It would be just maybe imposing some emotional decisions sometimes, rather than being aligned with what's important to you, your values, your priorities in life. So number 1, what is important to me? Number 2, what thoughts and feelings are worth protecting? Sometimes jealousy, for example, tends to be looked down on, at least in the male community. It's like not very it's kind of embarrassing to be a jealous guy. So that is maybe a feeling that you don't want to protect. It could be, you have feelings of wanting independence in your relationship. That's a feeling that you could want to protect, right? It could even be ideals. It could even be religion. Anything that's important to you for the most part. So what are your thoughts and your feelings that are worth protecting? Okay, number 3, what are my values? Kind of goes hand in hand with what we're discussing, but your values are not the same as your thoughts and feelings. They're different. So you could have some thoughts that go against your values, but those thoughts are important too. Number 4, which are the friendships I want to maintain? Like I said earlier, your partner might be concerned for real about some people that you are close to because of the dynamics that you have in relationship with those friends. It could be a toxic relationship, could be a person who has a negative influence in you, could be stuff like that. And that is very helpful if your partner can help you
get out of a situation that is not convenient for you for real. But it could be also that they don't like that person, or they're jealous of that person, or makes them insecure or something, reminds them of somebody who hurt them in the past. And in those cases, you might want to protect that friendship if that friendship is important to you.
Or fearing like you have a guy best friend. For example, I have always been someone who has guy friends my whole life. And that having a new boyfriend, and then there's the best guy friend, and there's this like uncomfort to, oh, but your best friend is a guy, and that could cause jealousy too, because there's this, oh, you spend a lot of time with this guy, you know, you're intimate with this guy. That can cause a lot of, so those type of friendships, you want to maintain your best friend, right? But so think about it.
Number 5, what are my needs? Doesn't need any comment. Yeah. What do you need in a relationship?
What are your
course.
needs? Yeah.
And going a little bit back on the 100% and 100% rather than 50 and 50. It's not like you are each other's halves.
Yeah.
You are your own, and you establish what are your needs
so like
in life,
support
and what are your needs in this relationship. What do you require from that relationship to feel satisfied?
Yeah, so like support and intimacy and fun and, you know, being seen and heard, your partner listening to your feelings, like understanding you as a person. Those are some examples. And yeah, then, my needs.
Identify those needs. Just have them
clear. But if
clear.
your need is like, my need is that my partner needs to read my mind when I'm not feeling well and just know what I want, otherwise I'm upset with them.
When I'm sick, they have to cook and bring it to bed. Maybe that's extravagant
need. Or like when they're sick, they, you know, like mine, I'll give you an example. Ray, in the beginning of our relationship, he's not as bad anymore about it. Like he got over it a little bit, but he didn't want to be around me when he was sick. Like he just didn't want to be around me. And it's like, for me, it's the other way around. I really want to be taken care of or given love when I'm feeling sick. So it was kind of like he avoided me because when he was sick, he didn't want anyone around him. But for me, it was important not to like cook for me and stuff, but to just to that like intimacy and love and like support, making showing the person that you care for them, right? Taking care of them in a way that you would want to take care of your little baby if they got sick, right? Or the person you love, your mom gets sick, you want to take care of them. Just that kind of like, yeah.
So my need when I'm sick, for example, one of my needs is that I want to be alone and I don't want to be talking because my throat hurts or something. So that is an easy one. I want to be alone. And I never communicated that. I didn't even know that about myself. We just figured it out throughout many times in life. Getting sick, you or me or both at the same time is a tricky one because I'm sick. I don't want to be around anyone, but you're sick and you want to have me around. And we don't have anyone else because we're like traveling something. So those are tricky situations in which we have learned what our needs are and how to set some boundaries around it. But at the same time, meet in the middle because you...
Yeah, like in those cases when you have like conflicting boundaries about something important like that, going to the middle is always important.
Okay, so number 6, what are the traditions or hobbies that I want to keep? Back to the beginning, have your own hobbies. And if one of your hobbies is like very extreme motorbike jumping and doing backflips,
danger extremes,
or you are into, I don't know, hunting, and maybe your partner is sensitive to animals, and you know that some things are worth giving up, some things are worth preserving. I cannot tell you which ones specifically, but comes down to looking inside, reflecting about it, like your partner is addressing, hey, this hobby or tradition of yours,
it's like dangerous, and dangerous, it stresses me out, and every time you're doing it, I can't function, like I'm having a horrible time. Or
like, I don't know, let's say, for example, you are from Spain, and I think they don't do it anymore, but in Spain they had this bullfighting or something.
Oh yeah, with the bull chases.
Yeah, and they like hurt the bull with a sword, and everybody's like applauding. Is something from the past, but that comes from there. So that's a tradition that maybe to your partner would be very cruel and horrible. And maybe she would ask you, hey, I know that's your tradition, but it's really difficult for me to have anything to do with that. you maybe go by yourself, but I don't want to join you, or maybe
Yeah.
please stop going. Don't give our money to that type of activity.
Yeah, and it's for you to decide, because ultimately, and we'll talk about this in another subject, but having that discernment to decide whether the things that all these questions that you answer for yourself, whether the differences are so big that maybe it's better to not necessarily be in that relationship, because there's 7.8 billion of us or some crazy number. And it is also important to discern whether, like in that case, if you have really important things like a sport is your life or something, and your partner just won't, and you're not willing to give it up. Sometimes in life, it's okay to say, look, I love you or whatever, but this is not for me. Like if it causes too much discomfort, there's too many conflicting things in answering these questions, sometimes it is better to walk away if you have tried everything. If you have put in the effort and you have tried, not just like, oh, this is different from my partner and they won't give in the 1 or 10 or 20 times I asked, so bye. There needs to be...
Yeah, remember we are humans. We're super
people.
complex and full of injuries in our emotional system.
And there's not just like a second chance, because let me tell you guys, you can do something once and a person will apologize, and then you give them a second chance. I can guarantee you, in most cases in the world, even in our own, even in my own, you're gonna mess up and do the same thing more than twice. There isn't this like, oh, I'm gonna give this person a second chance and then that's it, like it's over. There's so much going on for both, like all of us as individuals. And like we've mentioned, there's traumas, there's coping mechanisms, there's insecurities, there's fears, there's a lot of things to keep in mind, that this whole like second chance thing and then never again makes no sense, because you might have to talk about something many times, because people don't change by the click of a finger. That takes time. It's a process. It is not an overnight phenomenon.
Yeah, if your girlfriend's hobby is to steal cars,
Yeah, well, maybe you gotta pick your partners a bit better.
Okay, and number 7, the last one is, am I always striving for personal satisfaction and happiness? How can I do this more?
So that's a self-explanatory.
So yeah, we'll share these questions in the description. So if you wanna like use them in a particular situation, I would recommend like go to a park, to the beach, or if you are allowed to where you live, to the common areas in your building, to the garden, wherever you can be.
Another room.
Yeah, but I would personally recommend an open space.
But some people in some countries, you're like stuck in your apartment.
Yeah, that's why I said depending where you are. But if you can be outside and just for a second be by yourself and ask yourself those questions and have it clear. What are your needs? What are your values? What's important to you?
And I would recommend first answering these questions by just letting it out. Like, ask yourself the question and write whatever comes to mind, 100%. And then go through them each individually at the end of answering all the questions and ask yourself, is this one coming from pain, or is this a reasonable, where is this coming from? What is this triggering in me? Is this healthy? Go through all of those and re-look at them. But first write the completely first thing that comes to mind, and then kind of discern. And maybe you keep it anyway, even if you feel like it's a little bit unhealthy. It's okay. It will evolve. We change, we grow. It's not like definitive forever. It will change throughout your life.
All right, so why don't we get into story time? I'm going to get started with my story. Remember, we mentioned a situation in which you feel relieved when your partner is not around. And I didn't necessarily feel relieved. I felt sad the one time Sumi had to travel. So we had just moved to the island where we live now, Koh Samui in Thailand. We had been living here for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months maybe. And Sumi went to another city to visit her parents. They lived in a different place back then. And she was gone for a whole week. And during that week, I had normal, like a lot of work to do, and we would chat a lot and call each other, like video call at night before sleep. And I was making music with my neighbor too, so he would come visit at night, and we would make music until late, and then video call and sleep. And there was the one night that my friend and I didn't have plans to make music, like we had finished or something, and Sumi had gone to sleep already, and I was not sleepy, and I felt the curiosity of going out and you just go drive around town. For those who don't know this place, there isn't much to drive around. It is pretty dead at night. And so I went out, like stopped in a bar, and then stopped in this other place, looked around, like didn't interact with anyone, more than, some hello, whatever, where you from. But I didn't like join a group or meet someone or anything. I just literally went to observe the night out and come back home. And I never mentioned this like for 2 years or for a year and a half. In a completely unrelated conversation that we were like, I don't know, being honest about things that we had not, I brought that up. Yes, one time I went out by myself. I didn't do anything I shouldn't do, but why am I bringing this up? Because clearly I cared about going out by myself. I didn't know because I never asked myself that. Or maybe if I did, I lied to myself because I want to fit in so much in the relationship, in the quote unquote perfect relationship in which you left those things behind. Oh, going to the nightclub is fun. Being by yourself is not necessarily fun in the nightclub, but I have done that so many times in my life, and then all of a sudden I stopped doing it because the reason I went there was because I wanted to meet someone. So no, I was wrong. I just like to go there because of the music, because the music's really loud, because I like observing strangers without interacting with them, just looking at people and be like, wow, we humans are so crazy. So there was no malice behind it, but I somehow had to do it behind Sumi's back because
it was so silly to me when I found out, like, that's such a silly thing. Like, it's not a big deal to go out.
But it is an indicator of lack of boundaries. I should have, first of all, identify my needs of individual time, not necessarily going to the nightclub, guys. I don't crave that. But it was a time I wasn't busy, right? I was busy with work the whole day, and then we would go to sleep, and I wasn't sleepy, and that was the time I was around. But could have been in the middle of the day. It was just leisure time on my own in secret. That's a unhealthy situation. You should have your individual entertainment time. It's perfectly acceptable to do this, and if you bring it up and makes the other person insecure, upset, controlling, you should protect it, at least to give it a try and see how you feel doing this thing that you gave it some thought and realized. Or like myself, I had some unusual behavior, and when long time later, months later, we're actually talking about it. Great to talk about it because I get to think about it again in the future, later when it's happened long ago. And well, the situation was that we did not have enough personal space, individuality in our relationship, because we traveled around for, I don't know, a long time. We didn't stay in the same place for long enough. We didn't have any friends. We didn't have any sort of attachment to a place.
And on the other side of that, let me just add, is I was very tough about this in the beginning of our relationship. Like, my parents are very antisocial people. If you're listening to this, I love you. They are antisocial people. My parents don't like to have friends. And so I grew up very by myself with my parents and a friend. Like, I was always with my best friend. It was always just the two of us. So I had this dynamic of just the two of us. And my parents, like, we didn't have family gatherings. Once a year on my grand's birthday was when we actually did something that was a big family gathering. So it was always like me and my cousin, me and my friend, me and my parents. Like, it was never more than 3. And even when I had friends, the biggest group of friends I ever had that came to my house that were personal friends of mine were like 2 people. This is not including school. But even in school, I had a tendency to I was not comfortable being in big space, in big groups. And so in our relationship, Ray was the opposite, super social guy. Compared to me, I was not very social. I wanted to be, like, I am a social person. I'm introverted and extroverted. So there is that calling to be, but my upbringing and my patterns and my habits and my behaviors were against, or were just the two of us. So, and I was not very comfortable, like, in the beginning. I was so, like, in love and happy, and I just was not comfortable with the idea of Ray, like, going out with his friends all the time and leaving me at home, because I wanted to join, because I hadn't had social life in so long that I would kind of impose in his social life, because I didn't have much of my own. And I really wanted it. Like, I never felt like staying at home. If he had a group thing to do or a friend thing to do with friends, I would always want to go with, because I was longing that social. So I was overstepping his boundaries because of my past, like my insecurities and my trauma around social life and activity. Trauma, I mean, it's not, I'm using inverted commas here. It's not like a trauma, but it's just, it's my conditioning. That's a better word. It wasn't a trauma. It wasn't something terrible. Like, it was just my conditioning. And so, just to add to your story, that's
no, well, exactly. That's what the dynamic was for the first few years in our relationship, and those are some of the reasons why. Another part of the reasons why is because of my own fear of disappointing others, my fear of hurting the people I love, or strangers for that matter, at some point. So,
and they're like people pleasing.
People pleasing is like the rapper name for those characteristics. So that was the dynamic, right? So because of that, we were around each other more than what we ourselves consider to be healthy in the present. And that story is one of the flags that could not be discussed and addressed at the time, because I kept it a secret. I was so afraid that it would create a problem with trust, that she would not trust me because I did this. And in the moment, I think I even left my phone at home. Like, I didn't want to have the phone in my pocket, or I just didn't want to have anything to do with anything. I wanted to just go out and explore without having to communicate with anyone, with my partner or anyone. So that event, had that event been discussed when it happened, say, I don't know, when you came back from your trip or something, like, look, I did this, nothing illegal, but I did this, and this is a sign, we need to talk. I think I started pushing that agenda a little bit, but I didn't explain myself. So it was, but I did notice around that time that it was time for us to have friends. We were already settled here in this island.
Yeah.
And from around that time, it really started changing. Not only because of that event, but I think that event was one of the flags that raised for me after years, to say, hey, we need some more individuality in our relationship. Yeah. And we finally could do it, because a chunk of the time we were in South Africa, in which it was barely impossible to do things separately. I depended 100% on you, because you were the South African, you understood how things
and in
are
Colombia
done.
And
you had the bank account, right? It was all you. And then in Colombia and Venezuela, it was the opposite. You don't speak the language. The bank account, it was my mom's, not even mine. So it was really difficult to set those boundaries. But now, in a normal situation, we stopped traveling, we settled somewhere, and we started cultivating all these boundaries. So that's my story for boundaries in a relationship.
Yeah, and then, well, on another case of, like, your partner trying to like morph you into something that you're not. I have a story of my ex that he was very controlling, like he was very codependent, I would say, and he wanted me to be what was comfortable for him. He wanted me to be his past experiences. He was trying to recreate a version of his ex-girlfriend in me. And so he would overstep my boundaries a lot. He would, so he would force me to not. So in South Africa, we're very loving. We hug whoever, like, we don't even know you, and our way of greeting a stranger is hugging each other. And so I would hug my friends. I would send hearts and kisses and say I love you to my friends, because that's just who I was. And this was not acceptable for him. In his world, this was wrong. And so he would force me, like, he would overstep my boundaries all the time and say, you're not allowed to hug. He would threaten to, like, break up with me and stuff. And at that time, I was very lonely. I had no other option of being in a intimate relationship, and I longed to be with someone. I longed for some intimacy because I was living in Thailand. No one spoke English. So I was more changing who I was to fit something that was coming from a ridiculous place. It was coming from fear of, and not only necessarily fear, but I guess cultural too. It was cultural to a certain degree as well, but it had a lot of fear in it because of his past relationship as well, his past experiences. He was splashed. So it was kind of funny. It was like an irony. He was trying to turn me into the person that his ex was, but he was also trying to not at the same time. He was like pushed because she had a habit of like sending guys stuff. So he wanted me to be like her, but he also didn't. So it was very conflicting. It was like an inner conflict. He would refuse certain things and then tell me, oh, I wish you were more like her in this and this and this. And then in other cases, he didn't want me to be like that. So he said, you're not allowed to hug your friends. You're not allowed to tell your friends you love them or send hearts or kisses, because that's wrong. So that was a story in which it was kind of like trying to mold me and also break my boundaries because of his side of the thing only. And because I was in a situation where I was lonely and I had no other person around to be in an intimate relationship with, I just started molding into what this person wanted me to be because I had no other option, or that's how I saw it. I had no other option. And that is in many cases true. We feel like we have no other option when we really do have another option. So that's another story.
Well,
anything in our relationship in the beginning? Any other things?
I think you explained it already, like the fact that you didn't have much of a social background, and then when we started a relationship, you were like clingy and you
actually
would show
then
up.
From the same experience that my story I just mentioned, when Ray and I got into a relationship, then I would get upset with him for telling his friends that he loves them, or sending hearts and kisses and stuff, because for a whole year and a half, I was now conditioned to be shaped to someone completely different. But none of it was important to me. And instead of looking when I got out of the relationship and saying, what are my boundaries, my real boundaries, I just blindly went into a new relationship and carried this like version of me that was not really me. It was someone else's version that I had molded into, and I splashed it into our relationship.
And at the same time, that had an impact in me, because then I started doing those things less because I didn't want to make you unhappy. And I mean, it took literally years of conversation to get rid of that ghost that neither of us originally agreed with, but because of your year and a half with this person, the influence that it had an impact in our relationship in the beginning, and it was dragged like for 3 years into the relationship. There were still consequences of how this person drilled into you this approach to romantic relationships that is not realistic, is not reasonable, and in my opinion, it is destined to failure because it just creates the need for lying, right? So in a light version, like what you and I experienced, it's like always together by choice, having fun and everything. It was still unhealthy, and we had to face that and be like, okay, I am going to write in the Facebook group and ask if there's any jammings happening, and I'm gonna go to a bar to play music with strangers by myself, right? That I started seeking on purpose individual activities. You signed up for Muay Thai, and then you were going to Muay Thai class and make your group of friends there. And this is just another little story to add there. I was getting to a point, this happened around 2 years ago. Is it like 2 or nearly 3 years now? 2.5.
2.5 years ago. About 2.5 years ago, I started having an identity panic. an independence panic because I moved out of my parents' house in with Ray. Like we moved in together very quickly. Like we've mentioned in our intro, the full story, but we moved in together very quickly. And there were a lot of things that I thought I wanted to do on my own that I felt I couldn't do being in a relationship. And I felt that like, oh, I'm in this serious relationship and I'm so young and I haven't had all these experiences. So I wanted to move out, and I actually did move out. So that process of, and I mean, that was an extreme approach for me, but I understood myself, like I knew how I was. And there was a part of me that felt the need to take the time to be by myself, to have that experience. Because if I didn't have that experience,
you wouldn't have the certainty.
I wouldn't have the certainty that what I was doing, that the path, the direction I chose for my life was what I actually wanted for myself. And so in that time of our lives as well, because we lived separately, we got into being more individual as well, and it was very healthy. It was a very healthy change.
That was about 1 year after the episode of me sneaking out when you were traveling. So I do recognize that by the time you decided to move out, we had already for a pretty long time, maybe 10 months or so, we had been surrounded by a lot of people. There was a lot of people around us at home. We went to several group activities and individual activities. A little bit started happening. I started DJing in events, and you would go spend time with your friend from South Africa, and like that. It slowly started to happen, and for other reasons, it came this abrupt version of, okay, I'm moving out, I'm having my own life, and we see each other twice a week. But it was a great like accelerated progress in developing individuality, because it was like a boot camp of individuality. You are by yourself now, and we were still together, so we were not like heartbroken because I miss my partner, this relationship ended. Nothing like that. It was just like an abrupt physical separation.
It was just a change in lifestyle completely.
It cultivated a lot of individuality for either of us, even though I wasn't craving it, because I was forcefully placed in a position in which now I live by myself. All of a sudden I started cultivating my individuality and doing things by myself more, not even with other people, alone.
That was actually around the time we started speaking about these things, and you told me about going out secretly.
Yes. That's when I mentioned it. But there had been some progress for that year.
Yeah, there was progress before this had happened.
I think it had to do with actually settling somewhere and making friends.
And this can be, you know what, if you're in a situation in which you really cannot move out, if you're living with your partner and you really cannot move out, or you have kids, you know, there are situations in which you cannot just do what I did and like, okay, I'm gonna go live by myself for 6 months, right? You can still achieve this. You can still achieve this individuality by scheduling it. Sorry, guys. My little doggy's sneezing. Bless you, cosita. So yeah, you can schedule these. Make it a priority to say, okay, how much time do I realistically want to right now spend by myself? Once a week. Okay, schedule yourself an hour or two once a week or twice a week, right? Yeah. Make sure it's there and make sure you do it, because the more you do it, like the more you do it, the more you're going to realize, this is not actually so bad. This is amazing. And you're going to start being more connected to yourself as a person. And that's going to change your relationship dynamics too, because when you are feeling better individuality, when you're feeling better individually, then that time together is more special and comes from a more pure and loving place as well. Like it's a growth, it's a process of growth, and you can start by just scheduling in once a week, an hour by yourself even.
Well, in my opinion, I would like to add onto that. In my opinion, boundaries, healthy boundaries in a relationship are like an insurance policy kind of thing for when situations that are challenging show up, you have more than your relationship, right? You have more than just that. In the other hand, the codependent or controlling dynamic, I would actually like to explain what those two mean. In the codependent one, both people willingly give in to everything, agree on everything because of the fear of upsetting the other person. That is what we call codependency in a relationship, which is both people trying to mold into what the other person wants at the same time or taking turns for it. And controlling dynamic is when only one of them gives in and the other one is just getting, right? So obviously that one is easier to see. So nobody wants to be in a relationship of that type. I can tell you by personal experience, I have been in both types. I have been the controlled person and I have been the codependent person. And in both cases, I wouldn't like to put myself in a situation like that ever again.
I've been in both situations too. I've been both and I've been in both.
So in summary, for me, it's just an invitation to look into that aspect of your relationship and of your life, because this applies to relationship with your parents, relationship with your employer or business partners, right? So it is a universal concept, but in the context of romantic relationships, you don't want to be in a codependent nor a controlling relationship. You want to be in a relationship of mutual agreements and a feeling of freedom that is not magical, is actually generated through mutual efforts and through a conscious approach to your relationship. Let's not forget, a romantic relationship can evolve into a family, and that will have a huge impact in the upbringing of those potential children, and those people will interact with other people when they are adults, and they might hurt a ton of people along the way if from the beginning, when you're just dating, hopefully you start looking into things like boundaries, communication, etc. So
like
that's my personal take.
And like we were saying, thank you for sharing your personal take. Like we were saying before, like I mentioned, sometimes you need to be objective about what is it that you're willing to sacrifice of yourself to be in a relationship with another person. Because if you're not going to be happy with that person and you're going to get into a situation in which you have kids with this person, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing your kids a disservice. I think one of the most important things you can do for your kids is to pick a good mom or a good dad. And that means making sure that all these boundaries, all these things about individuality are there, that they're present, that they're worked on, and decided whether this person is actually someone you see yourself going on with in life. Because sometimes we are in a relationship for all kinds of reasons that are not because this person is the person for us or the type of person we want to move forward with and get married, have kids with, or whatever your vision of life looks like. Travel the world with, or whatever the case is, have 1,000 animals, whatever it is, whatever your story is or your vision for what your life is, make sure that you are looking at these boundaries and making sure that you are going to be happy, that you are choosing something, that you're not letting go of important things in your life, and then there'll be resentment and avoidance and all these things that come up in the future, because that's a recipe for disaster. And then boundaries are so important. I know because I've lacked them, I have broken them, and they're very important. They're not selfish. No matter how much someone tells you your boundaries are selfish, never listen to that person. I mean, sometimes you can have selfish boundaries and have the discernment to pay attention to if you're having a selfish boundary. Like we mentioned, some of our boundaries are just nonsense. They're just stories we tell ourselves that are not serving us. But be mindful about that. Be mindful about your boundaries and go through these questions that we gave you guys and take a look at what it is that is important to you for real.
Where in
And-
your relationship do you feel those things are being overstepped or
Where
violated?
do you feel you need to focus to work with your partner to improve, and actually give them that as well. Maybe you can, once you've done it and you've looked at it deeply, you can tell your partner, hey, listen, I did this activity. I listened to this super cool podcast that you just gotta listen to because it's awesome. And I got these really good questions about setting boundaries. So let's both do them, or I've already done mine. I would love for you to do them, and then we can sit down and discuss them so that we can create a healthier dynamic within our relationship.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that one.
You're welcome.
A special mention for a couple of people who have reached out with gratitude for what they have heard in the few episodes that we have uploaded so far. No names named, but yeah, very meaningful to us to know that because of us deciding to sit down here with a microphone and talk about these subjects in a structured way and share our experiences and opinions, it can have so quickly, like really, I didn't expect that, but so quickly it has already made a difference in a couple of people who have spent the time listening to it. So that is very motivating, and it feels really good to have that and be like lucky to have that so early in the journey of having a personal development media outlet, because there's very excellent stuff out there, and somehow you chose to listen to this.
So thank you.
Thank you for being there.
Very grateful.
And if you can give a little bit more, why not, right? You can follow or subscribe and all that good stuff. Like, leave a comment.
Share.
What is your story? Ask a question. Let's just have a conversation.
Yeah, let us know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Let us know what's triggering you. And this doesn't have to be publicly. Feel free to reach out to either me on Instagram or Facebook, or Ray on Instagram. The links are in the comments below. And yeah. Then what we're going to be talking about next week is trust in relationships, and how can trust be rebuilt once trust is broken.
So we will see you or hear you guys next week with another episode of Spark Love. Until then, thank you so much for tuning in, and see you next time.
Bye.
Adios.